Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana. This week's episode, we're happy to be here. I'm Barry Kramer, one of your hosts. I am the operator of California Patients Alliance. We're a GLACA approved and accredited dispensary here in the city of Los Angeles. And with me is...
Hi, my name is Yami Bolaños, and I'm patient operator for Pure Life Alternative Wellness Center on La Cienega, and I'm president of the Greater Los Angeles Collectors Alliance, GLACA, setting the example of excellence in medical marijuana since 2006 in the city of Los Angeles.
And joining us from Sacramento, once again on the phone, is our third host, Don Duncan.
Hello from Sacramento. This is Don Duncan. I'm the California Director of Americans for Safe Access.
Hi, Don, on the phone. And our guest today, master grower, a lecturer, a teacher, just coming off of a second win of the U.S. Cannabis Cup. It is Kyle Cushman. Kyle, thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me, Barry. It's really a pleasure.
Oh, it's a pleasure having you here. I think we're going to have a nice, lively discussion. We had a lot go on this week in marijuana news, and we'll just jump right in and talk a little bit about what's going on around the country. Saw a great thing today in a Michigan newspaper. This just caught my eye because of the civility and the correct way of approaching marijuana issue that this paper and the police seem to have taken in Michigan. So I'm going to read you a little excerpt of this. There was a guy in Flushing, a Flushing man growing medical marijuana knocks out power to his neighboring homes. Now, I know if that would have happened here in California and Los Angeles, we would have had cops all over the place. This guy would have been dragged out, and, the neighbors would all be watching what's going on. Flushing police, they went out and made contact with the homeowner, found out he was a caregiver. He had a basement full of marijuana plants. The homeowner was found to have a zoning ordinance violation, as caregivers in Flushing have to apply for a special land use permit and operate within the general business district. He said the issue falls under a civil infraction with the homeowner issued an appearance. The issue falls under a civil infraction with the homeowner issued an appearance date so that we can sit down with him and the city attorney to make sure we're all on the same page in what direction we are going with this. So nice. My jaw was like dropped. I have never read an article or seen a report of law enforcement and marijuana grow that has gone so civilly, and I hope it's a portent of things to come. This is how it should be dealt with.
Absolutely.
There was a problem. This guy is a caregiver. He was growing medicine for patients in Michigan where it's legal to do that. And he had an electrical problem. And he hurt his neighbors. I'm sure he apologized profusely to them. But that's what it was. It wasn't a huge crime. It didn't require the 8 o'clock, the 7 o'clock news to come out and say that, pot has been found and discovered in this home and caused the brownout. I loved it, and I really hope to be reading more things like that.
People actually acting civilly and normal and not making reefer madness.
Right. What do you think, Don? You think that's something to come? That's how things will be?
I think that is remarkable. Those are the exactly kinds of problems you want to have, right?
Yeah. Let's sit down with the city attorney. Let's work it out and figure out how we move forward, because it's a young industry, and so much is not known by people trying. We were just talking about this, Kyle. People trying to regulate the industry. There's so much that's not known by the people that are trying to do the regulation that is the correct way to do it. Sit down with people, find out what's going on, due diligence.
Isn't it also like many other situations where sometimes you have to make mistakes to learn? So here we are, the gentleman has made a mistake, it's being brought to light, they can sit down and discuss it, and they can
fix the electrical problem to his house.
Not only fix that issue, but maybe make it so that this doesn't continue to happen again and again, rather than just applying it to the person and his...
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
They're treating an electrical problem like an electrical problem. That's great.
Yeah,
great.
not like a marijuana issue. That's terrific. And up in Berkeley this week, I hear that the city council is considering increasing the number of medical cannabis dispensaries. Another example of how, when it works correctly, how things can work quite well. Berkeley, for many years, Don, you were originally up there and opened one of the original dispensaries up there, so you probably speak to this a little bit better, but they started out with, I think, 3 dispensaries, and then recently, in the last couple of years, voted to increase that to 4 when they saw the need for it. And then now they're going to increase it from 4 to 6 dispensaries in the city of Berkeley because they see the need for it. It reduces the clutter and mess around the existing dispensaries. It spreads out the patients and allows for growth.
It also provides for more choices for the patients.
And more choices for the patients, all of which are very good and all of which come through regulations.
Exactly.
When you regulate, you can do this kind of thing.
And, you know, I cut my political teeth in Berkeley in the early days and helped open 2 of the first shops that opened in Berkeley. And I can tell you, folks in Berkeley smoke a lot of medical cannabis. So they could probably use more.
They're sick.
You know,
up
what's
there?
interesting is that Berkeley's been attacked by the DEA, Berkeley Patients Group. And for the city to go ahead and say we need 2 more, you know, that's a deep understanding of how much need there is to provide medical marijuana to the patients in that area.
And again, it pointed out to me, you know, the proper way to regulate. We have the exact opposite example here in Los Angeles, where we have over 1,000 dispensaries still open, waiting to be put in order by Measure D that passed here in May. But with that many dispensaries, there was no way to ever tell if the industry was working correctly. There was no oversight on it. There's nothing that can be done by the city. And so it did. It got crazy out of hand. We have...
There were so many abuses by the illegal establishments. The ones that opened after they were supposed to open. I mean, they had Bikini Fridays. I don't know what's medical about that, but, you know.
So my feeling always has been, you know, if the city would have been on track with what it was trying to do back in 2007 when it issued a moratorium to stop the growth of dispensaries in the city, there were 187 dispensaries at that time. The optimal thing that could have happened, and Berkeley shows would have happened, is you'd have had the 187, and maybe in a year or 2, we would have known that that's just not enough for the population of Los Angeles, that we needed more. There were lines outside of places and, you know, disrupting the neighborhoods. And so the city could have then voted to issue more licenses and allowed more of the people that didn't get an opportunity in that first round to get in to open up a business. But it didn't work that way. We got flooded with entrepreneurs. I don't blame them, but I do blame the city for not regulating, and I point to this article from Berkeley and our situation here in Los Angeles to illustrate how regulation can help neighborhoods, the safety of cities, the operation of these dispensaries, all of that, and sure wish that
Yeah, and you know, Berkeley didn't wait till the last minute. They, in fact, were one of the first places in the entire state to adopt an ordinance. So, you know, these guys were at it way back in 2001 and 2002. They were adopting their first ordinance.
Yeah, and their city council, those people that are on there really know the issues. They're a deep
They do, and
Unlike our city.
And say what happened in Los Angeles, what happened in Berkeley or the other communities, is the city council in Berkeley wanted to make it work. They wanted to find a way to make medical cannabis work and be orderly and available in the city. Whereas in some other cities, I think we can be pretty sure based on their own words that there were many Los Angeles city council members who did not want this to work.
Absolutely.
No, they sure dragged their ass. They sure dragged their ass for 7 years about it too,
and still don't want it to work.
and still don't want it to work. You know, I mean, Mr.
Our whole city council voted to ban medical marijuana dispensaries at one point last year, and they just voted to oppose state regulations. So
Right.
the Los Angeles City Council still has a long, long way to go on this issue.
They sure
and they should be
have
taking
to.
notes from places like Oakland and San Francisco, Berkeley, from Sebastopol, from Palm Springs, from West Hollywood. You know, places that have done it right.
have regulated. They have a minimal amount of dispensaries and, grow as needed. And that's really just key and very important. Yeah, I was going to bring up the city council vote. I was going to sort of move on to the Amiano issue in AB 604, which was a bill here in the state of California to regulate. And just a little background on why that bill was so important. A couple of weeks ago, the U.S. Attorney General said that their enforcement wing is going to stay out of states that have regulations, strict regulations, that adhere to at least 8 guideposts that
They have to be state regulation, though. Yeah.
But they're state regulated, and if the state is regulating, the U.S. Attorney General's office is going to allow the experiment to continue and let the state take care of the problems within the state in order to correct them, and not come in and raid and harass as they have been doing. So our state of California here has no statewide regulations, and we were the first to have medical marijuana 18 years ago, is it now? 18 years. 17 years.
18 years, November 8th.
Yeah, so we're coming up on 18 years, and we still, after all of that time, have no regulation for our entire state. Things that go on in Northern California are different than they go on down in Southern California, are different than they are in the Central Valley. Law enforcement deals with it differently in all locations, and we really need statewide regulations. We needed them just for regulation's sakes for 17 years. Now we need them so that the federal government will not come into our state and disrupt how the state is trying to organize the industry. And our city council here in Los Angeles went ahead last week on Wednesday and voted
15-0
not to support the statewide regulation. I have no idea why they would have done that.
It was lack of information.
We can speculate what's going on at City Hall, of course.
Speculate a little. I'd love to know.
Told the City Council to oppose AB 604, which would have regulated collectives and cooperatives. And I did speak to one City Council member who said that they were frankly just very confused. We have to concede that this AB 604 really dropped on the plates of lawmakers in Sacramento and the state really at the last minute, with really just 4 days left in the legislative session. So that's not the best timing in the world for a complicated bill, 21 pages of provisions. Nevertheless,
but they've looked at this before, right?
This was a combination of 2 bills that had already been considered earlier in the session, so it wasn't really that groundbreaking. But I do sympathize with council members who were confused, and I wish if they were confused or frustrated with the timing that they simply taken no position as opposed to taking a sort of knee-jerk position. But I think it's definitely writing on the wall for us to consider that our city attorney, our new city attorney, who's purported to have a more reasonable and balanced position on medical cannabis, actually seems to have gone out of his way, according to Buzz at City Hall, to oppose AB 604.
That's really sad.
Yeah, it's really sad. It was key opposition came also from law enforcement agencies here in California. Law enforcement agencies that, if I'm not mistaken, Don, have been asking for these kinds of regulations to be put into place. And the same with the League of Cities here in League of California Cities. Also did not or opposed this bill because they said it took away their rights to regulate, to ban, to tell people, how make up ordinances, which it specifically did not do. Am I correct?
That's right. That argument is just false in its face. The only way that you could construe this as taking away any power from the city is that it required certain security provisions and what have you, and I can't see how that does anything but complement local regulation. It certainly does not prohibit any local regulation, and so I think that's a spurious argument. And the probably amongst the 3 most powerful lobbies in Sacramento will be the League of Cities, which represents local cities government all over the state of California, and then the California Narcotics Officers Association and the Police Chiefs Association. The latter 2 are represented by John Lovell, who is a lobbyist in Sacramento who has a personal crusade, it would seem, against medical cannabis. This guy is really gung-ho to shut down anything that he believes would would convey an air of legitimacy onto medical cannabis because he's afraid that will make it more acceptable to people. And so we really, this guy is somebody we really have to get around. And unfortunately, he does have the ear of those powerful law enforcement groups and by extension of many lawmakers, especially those moderate Democrats in Southern California who are a little bit ambivalent about medical cannabis. You know, they definitely tend to listen to cops ahead of patients.
Yeah, it's been hard though listening to them get many of the concessions that they wanted in these regulations, and then still basically, lie and say that they're not there, and then we oppose this.
Well, they've always lied, but
they're not working.
Now they're getting even more emotional because they see that we're beginning to gain traction. So they're getting more vehement in their attacks, I believe, even than they were a year ago. They're feeling the need. They're feeling the need to push back.
I agree, and the need for regulation has never been greater. In fact, last year the California Attorney General, in 2011, the California Attorney General Kamala Harris wrote to lawmakers and said, "Will you please clarify what the law is?"
Yeah.
And so we've got the Attorney General calling for it, cities and counties calling for it, law enforcement calling for it, patients need it and are calling for it, and even the industry is saying, "Please regulate us." Which is, when do you hear that? When do you hear an industry saying, "I want to be regulated"?
Regulated for years.
Everyone wants it, but we've got just a handful of lobbyists standing in the way. We've got to shut that down. We've got to build. We have to overwhelm them with numbers in Sacramento that are so big that they just can't keep up this facade of being reasonable and asking for concessions, and then always moving the line back.
Right.
Saying,
So
thanks, but we need even more from you now.
If you're listening out there, make sure you're going to start. You definitely are needed to talk to your Congress people, talk to your elected officials, and get this issue sort of cleared and get these people that are opposing us off their track. We're going to take a little break here, and then we'll come back and chat a little bit more about this and go on to some other things. I want to hear about Kyle and the cups that you're recently at. So we'll take a little break, and we'll see you back on the other side.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Talking Marijuana. You're here with Barry and Yami. Don's on the phone from Sacramento, and our wonderful guest, Kyle Cushman. We're talking a little bit California politics right now. Before the break, we were talking about what happened what's happening here in regulations and the shift that's going on. And anybody want to pick that up?
Well, we've been fighting for many years to get regulations passed. This year, California fell short again. Law enforcement lobbyists have been consistently standing in the way, and as far as we can tell, they're really the last impediment to regulations in California, which are important because the federal government, of course, now is saying that if your state has effective regulations, you won't be a priority for enforcement. And so we're really behind the gun here when it comes to state regulations, and law enforcement, who should support regulation, consistently stand in the way. So it's a very discouraging situation, and my personal belief is that they're doing this because they don't want to convey onto the issue of medical cannabis any legitimacy that might come with sensible regulations.
Right.
So there's a chance for folks to speak up about that. We're going to be out in Rancho Cucamonga, California. That's not a joke. That's actually a city near Ontario, Southern California. We're going to be out at Rancho Cucamonga, and we're going to be protesting in front of the first the first annual Marijuana Strategy and Policy Conference. It's basically a conference for police officers and their strategists and lobbyists to talk about how to roll back medical cannabis and to stop legalization and generally interfere in what the voters want. And so we've reserved the plaza outside their conference, and we're going to be there to protest and tell the media a different story about medical cannabis and cannabis legalization in general. So if folks are hearing this before Monday, the 23rd of September, please come on down. Come on down to Rancho Cucamonga near Ontario, and we'll be there at 10 a.m. in the morning from 10 to 1 to tell the media our story about law enforcement intransigence and blocking regulations and what we would like to see instead. So you can definitely do that. And also, I want to remind folks in California and around the country that, things don't always go your way. In the state legislature, they certainly didn't go our way this year. And that just means you double down the next year and fight even harder.
Right.
So, we have thousands of people advocating for sensible regulations. Now we need twice that many. We need to go into the tens of thousands and just overwhelm these powerful special interests with grassroots numbers. That's how we got medical cannabis in the first place, and that's how we're going to move forward in California.
Yeah, Kyle was mentioning that during the break, that people really need to be stepping up at this point and getting
come out
in touch.
and show your colors and stand up and be proud. I think that's the average person can do a lot just by standing up and being themselves and showing that we're not hiding in the shadows and that we're proud of who we are, and there's no shame involved.
And I think the point you were making was that as we come out, the opposition also has grassroots people that know more about the issue nowadays, and they're coming out on their side. So we can never really give up and let go and feel like the gains that we've made are good enough. They're never going to be good enough. We have to keep pushing, at least in the foreseeable future.
Until we are no longer second-class citizens, until we have the same rights as anybody else.
And Don, am I right? We once went to another
yes,
protest.
eradicating medical marijuana. That was when Tutanishir Scott voted into office, 4 years ago?
Right. So this is our second attempt at telling law enforcement that their job is not to make policy, their job is to enforce laws. And we have laws on our book. And the fact that they don't like them really doesn't mean shit, because there's a lot of laws I don't like, and I go to jail if I don't follow them. But these fat fucks, that are police people that just sit and have their. I mean, really, they just get away. They're like, I'm a law enforcement officer, and this law is shit, so I don't care about it. And it's like that just doesn't fly.
Well, it's emotional, and that's why we need to stand up and be ourselves and give all the reasons why we are who we are and do what we do. And let them be all emotional, and that's how it'll come across.
And although AB 604 is dead for right now, it'll come back in January. And between now and January, if everybody calls and tells their representatives and their state senators that we need legislation at a state level, that we need state regulation to keep the DEA out, then by January we can affect change. Even if it's dead now, we can affect change between now and then if we have enough people calling their representatives.
So those of you in California...
If we were to go in January with more than 10,000 signatures on a petition, that would have an impact. And the same thing goes for other states. If folks are feeling blocked right now, the thing to do is to roll up your sleeves and get back out into the parking lots and the farmers markets and the rock concerts and find your people. They're out there.
Yep.
That's right.
Hey, let's turn the conversation over to something nicer.
Funner.
Funner.
All right.
Funner.
I have never been to a cannabis cup.
No.
There was one here in Los Angeles.
Come on.
There was a medical cannabis cup in Los Angeles, maybe in 2008. It was
2007.
Yeah, it was an interesting event, but it was not the most organized event. I know that there is a long-standing cannabis cup that goes on in Amsterdam through High Times, and Kyle, you worked with High Times for many years, right?
I did. It's funny, if you take it way back, I actually was kind of the person who supplied cannabis to the staff of High Times before I got my job. And
those are good credentials. I don't know about you, but that's some really good credentials.
And it led to an amazing thing. It gave me a career as a journalist. journalist, as a staff journalist for High Times.
Awesome.
And that job I've turned into a consulting career, which I turned into a teaching career, teaching at Oaksterdam and various dispensaries up and down the coast here. And now I'm working pretty exclusively with Buds and Roses as one of their cultivation experts.
And Buds and Roses is a GLACA accredited dispensary here in Los Angeles.
Yes, so very proud.
So very
Good plug,
proud
Barry,
and
good
operating quite well. And
Yes.
really good.
Under the leadership of Aaron Justice and my grow partner Tyler Wadley, we're lucky enough to bring home our second consecutive U.S. Cup from Seattle.
It was the Seattle Cup.
Yes.
Now, this wasn't the Hemp Fest. You and I talked about that a little bit. The Hemp Fest was the week before. And this was the U.S. Cup.
Yeah, the Hemp Fest is a festival. It's the country's largest hemp festival put on by the people of Seattle. And the Cannabis Cup is actually a contest and an event put on by High Times Magazine. They've been doing Cannabis Cups in Amsterdam for a number of years, 20 some odd years.
Yeah.
And just a few years ago, they started doing them in the States. And they call it the High Times Medical Cannabis Cup. And that is that people in the legal states where they hold these, if you are a dispensary or a legal seed company or things of that nature where you have a license to operate, then you can enter the cup. Just recently, because of the new laws that were passed by the people of both Colorado and Washington, making it legal for adult use, meaning that you don't have to be labeled sick in order to legally use cannabis, just an adult over the age of 18, it made it so that the contest is open to everybody. So they simply changed the name. They call it the U.S. Cup, and it was open to anybody who attended.
Was there a significant increase in participants as far as the growers were concerned because it's open to everybody and not just medical licensed?
The Denver Cup was
huge.
Amazing. It was huge. There was over 16,000 people. And there were, let me think here really quick, there was about 150 to 160 entrants in that contest. And I'm
on my 160th sample here.
How many days do they do that?
No doubt. This is the best.
Well, it's interesting because in Amsterdam, it's a little bit more subjective. It's a little bit not quite as professional in that the people show up tired from a long trip to Amsterdam. You only have 3 days there to judge all the samples. Here in the United States, what they do is they break it up into categories, of course. So there may be 150 samples, but they're broken up over indica, sativa, hashes, and edibles. And then what they do is they pick a judge. You will only judge one category. And then you're given those 30 or possibly 40 samples a week in advance, and you get to take them home with you and live with it. And so you can actually wake up every day and do a couple, do some in the morning, so it's actually very
much more informed decision and conclusion that was reached out of something.
It's really the most professional cannabis competition, I think, out there.
Oh, that's awesome. And you've dealt with many.
Yeah, you know, and they're usually very, and I still say, you know, they have to be taken with a grain of salt. I mean, it's kind of like a sport. Anybody can beat the Yankees on any given day, and the same thing. Any combination of judges could decide that they like a certain thing better than the other.
Right.
But it's really quite an honor to be chosen by your peers as being one of the best competitors.
Well, it's not a coincidence that you guys are chosen a lot. I mean, it's a good product. It's wonderful.
Tell us about it. Tell us about what you entered and these two different cups. You have 2 cups here.
Yeah, I've got one here that we won a couple months ago in Denver at the first U.S. Cup in Denver that I was just mentioning. And then just last weekend, we entered our veganic strawberry cough and took home first prize again in Seattle. And that was really a wonderful, exciting thing for me.
Yeah.
Strawberry cough has been my favorite strain for 15 years now. And it's my favorite strain to smoke, my favorite strain to grow.
Well, practice makes perfect.
Yeah.
But you helped bring, this is a fairly common strain now, strawberry cough. Maybe not quite as common as OG Kush's would be or a Blue Dream, but it is in the in the index of solid sativas.
It
strawberry
has
cough.
definitely gained a lot of notoriety. I mean, there are really only about a dozen really worldwide popular strains that everybody's heard of around the world. And I think strawberry cough quickly became one of them because of it has a very special cannabinoid profile. And the way I like to describe it, for me anyways, it's kind of like putting a pair of binoculars up to your eyes. I mean, you know the binoculars, you have that little wheel that you get to roll back and forth until the vision is just perfect. That's what strawberry cough seems to do to a lot of people. It's very motivating, very stimulating. It's not debilitating in any way. And it's really extremely medicinal.
That's a kind of medicine that many of my patients, and I'm sure yours as well, come in and are looking for. They know this medicine can help them. They're a little nervous about using it during the day because they don't know how it will affect their chores and their job, what they're doing. And so they want something that they can feel confident in, that they can still focus and get a job done, but get the relief from the medicine that they need to move through the day. So it's great to find strains like that. And you said that you had actually, it wasn't you that created the strain, but you put the strain out there into the world.
I did. I helped discover it. The world seems to want to credit me with some things very kindly that I actually didn't do.
You're good about setting the right so that's
I've been saying for years that I did not create the strawberry cough. I found it. Early in my career, I was doing consulting for people, and I had somebody out in the hills of Bridgeport, Connecticut, a novice grower with a whole hodgepodge of aluminum foil reflectors and a flood lamp here, and really terrible. I remember I couldn't even bring myself to give him any pointers because it was just so messed up. And as I'm leaving his basement and walking up the stairs, he says to me, "Here, would you like to have a clone of this, Kyle?" And I took it back to New York City, and I wasn't growing at the time, being a journalist for High Times. And I was getting ready to throw it away. I took it as a courtesy, and I took it out of a brown paper sack, a lunch sack, and somehow this little clone with only 1 or 2 inches of surface area of leaf on it, the bag smelled like it had a pint of strawberries in it.
My God.
And it spoke. It said, "You will grow me." And I went to a very good friend in the city, and I said, "You will grow this." And he said, "What do you mean? I'm growing the Super Silver Haze. This is the best. This is the Cannabis Cup winner."
Yeah.
I said, "Look, you want to keep getting free samples of things from my cultivate." And very quickly, within about 2 years, it became the #1 most popular strain in New York City in all the delivery services.
That's great. Well, it's exciting to have a very good new strain. Patients tend to get a sense of what do you call it when you're
Anxiety?
No, when you've reached sort of your max tolerance.
Yeah.
You can. Marijuana is a medicine that you can create, it can have a tolerance to, and at that point, you need to move away from a specific strain and find something to replace it and give you the same kind of bang for the buck that you got with the original strain that you've now grown tolerant.
The interesting thing is that I've been smoking strawberry cough for 15 years, and 1 or 2 tokes still does the same thing that it did 15 years ago.
It's very interesting because DJ Short also has developed a bunch of strains, and his Vanna White, that's what he says about it too. That's mine, and he created it for him. And that when he smokes it, it's been how many years, and still 2 or 3 hits, and he's good. It's always works for him. I wish I could find a strain that I could say that about.
A lot of that has to do with your dosage too, because everyone's body will downregulate eventually, which is what tolerance is. So if you just smoke in moderation, you can keep an effect you like. So people should think about that.
Yeah. Let's take a little break. We'll come back and pick up this conversation on the other side of the break, and it's interesting. We'll talk to you later.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey, everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi, everybody. Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Talking Marijuana. You're here with Barry, Don, and Yami, and our man of marijuana, Kyle Cushman. Welcome back to the discussion. We're talking about strains and how you sort of create a tolerance to those and search for the strains that can continually cycle in and out of your pharmacopoeia, I suppose. For me, it's Afghani. It's an indica, pure indica. I find that strain works for me medicinally better than almost anything, any other kind of medicine I've ever taken. It's very calming and settling. It doesn't take my focus away unless, of course, I'm ready to be unfocused, and then it allows me to kind of drift into that state. And it's great to find these really good strains that you can count on working in specific ways in your body, and that's what the medicine of medical marijuana is all about. Finding that out. Now, you are working with something kind of new, and we've talked about it with Aaron on the show here in the past. But you have Veganics, a vegan way of growing the marijuana. So you're not using any animal byproduct. Obviously, there's no animals in marijuana, unless you're smoking really good marijuana, and you can kind of go follow that one. But I'm interested in Veganics. Another one of our guests, Joey's mom, is using a Veganic strain for her son who's autistic. She feels, I think, comforted by knowing that it's a Veganic strain. That was something I sort of gleaned from her.
Well, there's actually, if we can call it unverified science, but there is some science behind it. And a lot of, we've been working with the Unconventional Foundation for Autism for several years now, and with Joey, and it was really miraculous for me, because when I first met Joey, of course he has Down syndrome, and I'm sorry, he's autistic. He's autistic. And when I first met him, there was really no connection whatsoever. And about 6 months later, after he had gotten on the veganic cannabis, I actually was able to walk into a room and make some overt comments, and because I know he heard me, I would get a smile out of him, and occasionally I'd actually get some eye contact with him, and I know if that meant something to me, I can only imagine what that meant to his mother, for being able to actually spend time, real time, with her son, reacting and getting feedback back and forth. I believe that has something to do with the extremely low levels of heavy metals. Many people believe that heavy metals in the system have to do with autism. Aggregate toxicity in the environment and such, and things like that. You know, there's heavy metals in everything. There's heavy metals in peaches, and there's levels of everything. Veganics has a much lower level because we're not using animal products to grow the cannabis. So Veganics actually has a much lower level of residual salts and a lower level of heavy metals. And what Miko found when she switched over to the veganic cannabis was that every couple of months she found that she had to switch strains, and that as soon as she switched to the veganics, because it was that much purer, and assuming that it's because there are fewer impurities, that the medicine is actually more effective. And she found that she did not have to switch strains as often.
Still has to switch strains, but it took a longer time for him to build up a tolerance.
Exactly. And she found that the medicine was actually more effective, presumably because it had less heavy metals in the medicine that would interfere with it actually doing what it was supposed to do, so it became more effective.
Are your veganics? Let me just ask: are they a high CBD content? Do you know?
Well, that has more to do with the strain. Veganics is just a cultivation method. It's a method for growing the cannabis. And by the way, I didn't discover it. I didn't create it. Veganics is as old as the wind. It's as old as organics. People have been growing veganically. Veganics basically stands for vegan organic. So all of the products we use have to be organic to begin with, and then we just remove the animal products. And
so you're not using bat guano and...
We're not using any bat guano.
Take the poop out of the
take the poop out of the pot.
Huh?
And yeah, we're not using any slaughterhouse products, no animal byproducts whatsoever, so you've eliminated the chance of cross-contamination of pathogens such as E. coli or salmonella that can be present in animal products. Then again, you're also making it safer for people to cultivate at home because you're not bringing guanos and making teas from these wonderful products that really, I'm not trying to, pardon the pun, poo-poo on organics.
No, absolutely.
Organics is a wonderful thing, especially outdoors.
Yeah.
It's when you bring cultivation indoors and into a confined space, when you're growing in buckets or beds or things like that, that the residues don't have any method for leaching out, running away, and it's sitting in the bucket. So by the time you get to the end of your growth cycle, and the plants have removed the nutrition from your guanos and things like that, you're still left with the poop. And the poop is left in the bucket, and it affects your pH, and it makes you have to do certain things to the feeding schedule to compensate for it.
Right.
Where with veganics,
you just take that out of the equation.
It's 100% bioavailable, all the nutrients you put in, so you have to put in less fertilizer to do the same amount of work because it's all available. So your soil ends up much cleaner at the end, your product ends up much cleaner at the end. And what I've really found, and this isn't just my own observation, what I've gotten from many people is that veganics is so much cleaner that after the high is gone, there is virtually no crash. Instead of bringing you up and then bringing you back down below where you were, you kind of left off the trip exactly where you were. And I get that from a lot of people. It's very clean. Yes.
I bring up.
Well, it's wonderful.
I've
tried it.
CBD question because I've noticed lately, especially with the Sanjay Gupta announcement, that the parents that are using medicinal marijuana for their children's diseases, autism, seizures that are coming on, are constantly mentioning that they've gotten a high CBD, that's what they're looking for, a high CBD extract of that. And it's usually an extract that can be given orally. I'm wondering if we're not wandering into a misinformation with that somehow the concentrated extract needs to be of high CBD, or you're going to get really high. You're going to get psychoactively super high. And I find that with a lot of the concentrates, like Rick Simpson oil that we carry, and Rick Simpson oil is a high concentrate, it is not a strain that's high CBD that it's made with, but it does give the medicinal effect without a huge psychoactive component to it. So it's helped our cancer patients and many other patients that have come in to use that. So I guess all of that, what I'm trying to figure out in all of my reading and stuff is, do these concentrates need to be high CBD, or is that something that is a comfort for us as uneducated people? We go, okay, well, the high CBD takes out the high, so I can get all the medicine without the high.
Well, if you know what I'd like to say to that is, I am really glad that we did not discover CBD 10 years ago.
Yeah, no kidding.
Because if we had discovered the magic of CBD 10 years ago, all of the opposition would have used that against us for legalizing THC in cannabis.
I agree.
That being said, they're both miraculous medicines in their own right.
Yes. And CBD, I don't poo-poo that at all. I think they're amazing.
And not only that, we've only scratched the surface because there are many cannabinoids that some of them haven't even been named yet that are also going to be found to have very special medicinal qualities.
Yeah.
So it's a personal choice, you know.
I think that right now with all the information that Mr. Gupta or Dr. Gupta put out about cannabis and children using it and stuff, I know I've had a couple conversations with people talking about, well, if they're going to give it to their kids, they want a high CBD strain because that's not going to get them high. That's the freaking bottom line.
Sure.
And they think,
and that makes perfect sense.
for a parent to want not get their child high.
Absolutely.
But the problem is that I think that they're getting misinformation because, like this lady came in the store the other day, wanted to know where she could find pot that didn't have any THC in it at all.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, but that's not going to help you.
Well, you know what?
You need all the components in the strain. Yeah, you can't just take something out,
we are really at the dawn of this new field that we're getting into, and all the information right now, I believe, is almost purely anecdotal, in the sense that CBD works for some people straight, and some people will tell you that in order to really get the best effects, it has to have a certain amount of THC in it. So this is all anecdotal right now. There may be some people who benefit from pure CBD, and there may be some people and/or ailments that can only truly be helped with a certain percentage of THC attached along with it. We don't know right now.
I think we're definitely going to see that's the case. Dr. Marcoux out in Philadelphia.
I agree. I absolutely agree.
The synergy between cannabinoids is crucial to the medicinal benefits. So that certainly would seem to reinforce that.
Right. So early on, for people to be just looking for pure CBD seems kind of like a natural evolution. They're looking for this medicine that they hear is so great, but they don't want to impart any kind of a psychological high to young children. But if the choice is for a child to have a small amount of THC, but yet be able to function in life and to not be crippled on the couch with seizures, there really is no choice. But for the parents to be looking for these things early on, I think is perfectly natural.
Yeah, absolutely.
But for some reason, it just makes them feel better to think that they're taking the THC out, and it's okay to give their kids things with high CBD as long as they don't get them high. And it's kind of like, it's hard to explain that to people, for them to understand that you need a little bit of everything. You need all the components for it.
Which is one of the
it's
reasons
the whole plant
Marinol
extract.
is such a sort of so-so drug.
It doesn't work.
Well, it works for people
For
with
some
certain
people,
things,
a few people.
but it doesn't. Marinol does not have the complex structure that the natural plant has. They've extracted what they feel is their active ingredient, an ingredient they want to work, the pharmaceutical company, and that's what they use. And this is a plant grown in nature that works, beautifully. It's taken all the time that the history of the world's been around to evolve, and it works in conjunction with all of the cannabinoids that are in that plant.
And the interesting thing is that over the last several decades, that breeders have been growing cannabis specifically trying to breed up the THC content, because that's what everybody wants. There are breeders now who are breeding up the CBD content, and they're actually breeding down the THC levels. And I think that is going to lead us to new medicines that don't have to be synthesized. In other words, you don't have to take a whole flower extract, synthesize it to remove some of the THC. You're actually going to have whole flowers that can be concentrated, just as we've done all along, that will have the proper profile for different ailments, and I think that's really exciting.
As a little side note to this, and I don't know if you know this, Don, but up in San Fran, there's about to be a dispensary opening that is pure, only CBD products. They're only...
I did see that. So that's, they're definitely embracing that trend. It's also a very interesting exercise in market segmentation, so we should keep an eye on that to see how that fares.
Works.
Yeah, well, and most people definitely go to the medicine to get an effect that they will feel, whereas CBD is mainly an effect that you you might feel if you're in extreme pain and it alleviates the pain, you will feel that, but you will not feel that. Any psychoactive.
But they are all important. Legalizing the plant.
It's also important for folks, when they're using a medicine, what it is they expect to feel actually has a big impact on being able to mentally access the relief. That's sometimes referred to as the placebo text, which is not to be confused with the placebo effect.
Right.
But a placebo text is a story we tell ourselves about medicine. For instance, when you taste cough syrup, that indicates that you're expecting relief in your throat. And so THC does have a function in that regard, in that it sort of turns our body's systems on to being receptive to the medicine that's in the cannabis. So there's definitely there are important places for THC in cannabis medicine for sure.
Yeah, we're going to take our last break here and come back and rejoin this conversation and talk a little bit about dosing and how that goes along. I found an interesting article about that this week too, and want to just bring something up on that. So we're going to take a break. We'll see you after the break.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Hi, John Lovitz here. It's time to put laughter back into your life. Check out the John Lovitz Comedy Club, located in the heart of Universal Studios City Walk, Los Angeles, not Orlando. For tickets, go to thejohnlovitzcomedyclub.com.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
And welcome back to Talking Marijuana with your hosts Barry, Don, and Yami, and our guest today, Kyle Cushman. We are talking marijuana here, and something that I saw this week, again, back to our papers in Illinois, it's our newest state. Don't answer that, Don. It's my home state.
Your home
newest
state.
state to come on board as a medical marijuana state. And from the Chicago Tribune, they're talking about, the headline is, regulating medical marijuana isn't as easy as you think. I don't know who she thinks it's easy, but I would agree with that.
It's very easy, so that's not encouraging.
I would agree with that statement. And the summary of her article is basically, even though Illinois has signed a medical marijuana bill, the Department of Agriculture, which is going to oversee the program, has much work to do in regards to regulations. Marijuana is still illegal in federal law. Still, potential growers are clamoring to get on the ground floor in Illinois, which will limit cultivation centers to 22 and 60 dispensaries. Inspecting and regulating batches of medical marijuana may prove too costly and inefficient. I agree with that statement. And then what really caught my eye was many are concerned that doctors recommending the drug do not understand it well enough. We talked a little bit about this earlier, that people that are coming on board now, they're working off mythology.
Even if you're assuming that they really want to make good legislation, they just don't have the knowledge. They're not of the culture.
Right.
And we need people of the culture to assist.
Starting, even with the strict regulations, they say that doctors are unfamiliar with medical marijuana, might not know the right amount to prescribe. He said the correct dosage hasn't been clearly worked out for most disorders. Now, in the article, they quote Paul Armentano. He's one of our old legislators. He's not a legislator anymore, but he is the deputy director of the National Organization of Reform of Marijuana Laws, NORML, and he says the amount prescribed is of lesser concern because marijuana is impossible to overdose on, and like other prescription drugs are. The primary reason, the concern would be that many prescribed drugs, in the opiates in particular, have very low thresholds results for overdoses. And marijuana, conveniently, has a very low risk of toxicity and has no lethal overdose potential. And this was what really got me, because I've known this information for a long time, but had a very difficult time in expressing it to people. But he says that if you compare medical marijuana to steroids prescribed to people with asthma who generally use an inhaler, the patient administers the prescription drug by inhaling it when they feel an attack coming on. That is how the dosing of marijuana works. Since there is no lethal limit to it. It's not like you're taking 5 pills that you're only supposed to be taking one of, or you will overdose on those pills. Marijuana is you can titrate yourself. You can, if you feel you're needing it, you can smoke a little, and in an hour or two later, when you need it some more, you can take a little bit more. That is not the way that it is with prescriptive medicines, and it is going to prove to be a very difficult problem as we move ahead, and we are going to be moving ahead with legalization, and then we're going to have to figure this out in a logical way.
Well, not only is there virtually no toxicity from the drug, it is always going to be a self-administered medication, and that's not only because of the medication itself, but it is also because of the individual person. Unlike opiates or such as Vicodin or codeine or things like that, pharmacopoeia is very comfortable with saying you give a 100-pound person a certain number of milligrams of a medication, and it's going to have a very measurable effect. And the miraculousness, if that is a word,
Works for me.
of the drug itself is what has been helping to keep it illegal. Because in the eyes of pharmacopoeia, there's virtually no way to quantify or qualify the amounts that a certain person should take. Therefore, it's hard for them to write up a certain entry into a journal and to approve it. So it's how mysterious and wonderful it is that's been playing into their hands until now.
Well, I hope that people like you are always going to be informing as you move forward in your educational capacity, that you inform people about this, and I know you will, and that's what we need in the industry. We need many things, and they will all come in their good time. That is definitely one
information.
notch. And what that made me remember, this article about dosing and that there is no toxicity level of this, is a great phone call. It's a 911 call. Many people listening, all 3 of you out there, probably
at least 2 or 3.
At least 2 out of the 3 have heard this before. It's on YouTube. It's been around. It's been viral for many, many years, but I've wanted to play it on our show for a long time, and now it's perfect because it deals with this subject. And it's about 2 minutes long. I'm going to pop it on here, and this is our first foray into real tech on our podcast. Looks like it's going. It should be.
Okay.
And it's playing.
Where is it playing? Oh, you can hear.
You can hear me?
Emergency?
Yeah,
Can I hear the...
rescue. I think I'm having an overdose, and so is my wife.
Okay, you and your wife?
Yes.
Overdose of what?
Marijuana.
Okay.
Please come. I think we're dying.
Okay, we're on our way. Okay, how much did you guys have?
I don't know. We made brownies, and I think we're dead. I really do.
Who made the brownies?
My wife and I did. She's on the living room ground right now.
Is she breathing?
She's barely breathing.
Is she awake?
I don't think that's a great 911 call at all.
I'm going back really slow.
We're watching it here, Doc.
How much did you buy?
Probably like a quarter ounce total.
And was it a big batch, a little batch?
It was a quarter ounce.
Is this a new Saturday morning cartoon?
I probably had like a small chunk,
No,
but I
they
don't know
put-
what was it. The
It's
marijuana
on
could have been.
TV.
There could have been
Yeah,
something
so
in
they
the
put the
marijuana.
real voices of the phone call
Is
to
there
the
any
cartoon.
animals in the house?
Is there any what?
Do you have any dogs, cats?
I'll put them away for you.
Do you guys do this on a regular basis?
No, this is the first time that we've ever done it. Let's just go in the Red Wings game.
It's funny, but
Let's just go in the Red Wings game.
I've got no clue. I don't watch the Red Wings.
Oh, okay. I just want to make sure this isn't some type of like hallucination that I'm having.
Oh, why? What does the score say?
3 to 3.
It's 2 to 2.
Okay. Please tell your officers they just passed me.
Go outside and flag them down, okay?
Okay. My mother-in-law just got here too.
Okay.
Okay.
Alrighty.
That's it. Oh my goodness. Well, awesome. We couldn't hear it here in the studio, but I heard it so many times. We could see it. Thanks to Current TV for animating that. I don't know who the animator is, but what a wonderful job they did. And it's just so wonderful. This guy who is a cop calls up and says, I've overdosed. I think we're dead.
I want to know what strain he was.
I know.
He took my next couplet.
He basically took a bag of herb and cooked it into the brownies. From what I understand, I read a little bit about this case, and he and his wife had taken the herb along with some other drugs out of the evidence room at the police station.
Right.
Wow, I know.
He was fired, which was great. Well, he should have been. But
why?
That clearly shows the ignorance of people. Law enforcement. This was a long time ago. I give him a break. But the ignorance of people in marijuana. I mean, I ate a pot brownie and I'm dying.
Well, you know
My
what?
wife's on the floor.
Well, but just to be just and fair, I have friends that have eaten edibles and they thought they were dying and went to the hospital, had the ambulance come. And
I understand that
to
experience.
be fair,
But when you're a police officer,
you should know better.
You've been dealing with
Yes.
people that are probably, high. You're not dying that have eaten pot brownies. I mean, but when you're high and you've never been high before, as this couple lovely was, I'm sure they experienced.
I wonder if they tried the other drugs.
I don't think they tried anything after that. I think they went to jail, which was good, but they gave us a lot of enjoyment.
It's a good thing he experimented unknowingly with just cannabis.
Yeah, right. I guess they thought pot brownies, that's not going to hurt anybody, right? But it's true, you can eat a pot brownie and really feel like your world has been turned upside down.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you're dead. And you cannot overdose. So I would advise patients that are in that position or recreationalists that are in that position and you're in there for the first time to just know that that's the effect that you wanted when you ate the brownie. You will come down from it and it will be very easy on your system. You just need to breathe, relax, maybe eat some food and sit with a friend if you can.
Get a good night's sleep and have a good meal.
So that's a good segue into Dope of the Week. This guy would have been Dope of the Week, but it's years ago, so he's like Dope of 1997 or something. This week we do have our wonderful segment, Dope of the Week. Don's going to take us through and tell us who that is.
Yeah. Our dope of the week this week is, unfortunately, it was otherwise very helpful park rangers at our federal parks. It was revealed in the media this week that park rangers at federal parks since 2009 have arrested 27,700 people for cannabis and medical cannabis possession.
How many?
And
27?
that is not a typo. 27,700 people have been arrested at federal parks. Most of them were subsequently released, but arrested and cited. 27,700 people, regardless of medical or non-medical cannabis use. And I just have to wonder if the park rangers don't have enough on their hands without really continuing to prioritize this kind of enforcement. So they're definitely the dopes of the week for wasting that much time on what should be a harmless crime.
And Yosemite is one of the biggest culprits. Yosemite here in California.
Yosemite, of course.
And who doesn't want to go to a national park and enjoy some medication?
On 4th of July.
Well, we want folks to be careful with their lighters, of course, in the dry areas.
Yeah, absolutely.
What a crazy thing to make a priority. And, one of the things we hear all the time in Washington, D.C., they say, the DOJ, the DEA, are federal officials, we don't target patients.
Yeah, right.
Well, they do in the parks. So they're the dope of the week, the park rangers.
I felt like a bit of a dope this past 4th of July. I was on a beach here near Malibu celebrating the 4th of July, and I wanted to, after I'd been there a few hours, I wanted to smoke some cannabis. And I went and took a good 10-minute walk to the end of the beach walked past
No one there.
hundreds of people sitting against the rocks. I lit up, and sure enough, this guy comes over to me, and he says, "What is that?" And I'm like, "Well, what do you think it is?" He says, "You're going to have to leave." I said, "Really? Why?" He said, "Don't you see the signs everywhere for no smoking?" I said, "No." And he held up a coaster. He had a coaster in his hand. Evidently, they were giving out at the bar, and it said, "No smoking." You know, and you know, I didn't get excited. I said, "Well, you know, doesn't it count at all that I walked fit? I mean, I really went out of my way to not really,
you know, open space
to bother anybody, out of the view of children and everything." I said, "I will put it out." I said, "Don't you think, I deserve maybe to stay and go back to my?" He said, "No." He says, "This is terrible. You have to go." And he ejected me from the beach.
Wow.
And I thought to myself, you know, if I was in New York City, I wouldn't have gotten thrown off of a beach for smoking a joint.
my God.
But here in Malibu, California, I was thrown off of a beach.
Wow, that's crazy.
That's some of the power thing. That people
I remember this. I remember what he said to me. So I'm having this conversation back and forth, and he looked at me and he said, "I don't know what makes you think that cannabis is legal." I said, "Haven't you ever heard of Prop 215? He said, "Well, federally it's illegal." I said, "Are you a federal agent?" He said, "No." And he just kept. He said, "You are completely mistaken if you think marijuana is legal."
You're the one that's
the
mistaken,
ignorance.
Well, that's where law enforcement's education also has to come in. Our past guest, Diane Goldstein, is constantly on that the guys on the ground, you know, the higher ups, they make the policy and stuff, but the guys on the ground, they're lost. They don't know what to do. They're kind of doing their own thing.
He was just infringing his own personal.
And then some people who are really assholes, and we know that there are police people out there that love the power that they have. Those guys that stop in a lane of traffic so that they can give a guy a parking thing or whatever and hold up traffic and make those are assholes. They are people that want to show I'm in power and you're not. And unfortunately, when you run into them, there's not much they can do because they have the badge.
Because they have the power. So, I think, honey.
Are we done? Do we have any more time? We got 1 minute. I'm just going to say that for our stupid Mayor Filner down in San Diego, San Diego is finally on a path to get legal marijuana and have dispensaries open up again. And then that guy had to go pinching women's asses and doing all kinds of crazy shit. And now that he's gone,
they turned the clock back about 20 years.
I think there's an Elliot Spitzer thing going on in San Diego. I'm not saying he was always very appropriate, but
maybe we'll talk about that more next week.
For his political positions.
Yeah, we'll talk about that more next week. And I just want to thank Kyle again for stopping by and chatting with us. Really
Thank
great.
you, Dami, for having me.
And thanks,
Thank you, Don.
And we will see you next week.
Pura vida.
Pura vida.
You are listening to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Upcoming shows to the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.
Welcome to FYI. It's Dimitri Young here with Robert Fick. Hey everybody, welcome to Talking Marijuana.
Hi everybody, Crabman's Rock and Roll Revival featuring Frazier Smith is on the air, in your hair, and going out everywhere around the world.
I'm Gary Garver, live from the John Lovitz Comedy Club.
This is the John Lovitz Vodcast Network.